Hello fellow Unreal Engine artists, designers and developers. Welcome to the first episode of this Arctic Forest creation series. As you can see, it's a world away from the saturated colours of my Tropical Island series. This will be a chilly, brooding, monochromatic landscape. In this first part, we'll be creating the terrain in TerreSculptor, importing it into Unreal Engine, creating a lake and setting up the overcast atmospheric lighting. So let's get started. Welcome to this first episode. We're going to create an Arctic forest, and today we're going to create the terrain. So you can see on the screen here I've got an image reference of the sort of terrain I want to create, and if you look at the top left here, you can see that it's just sort of gentle hills that I want to create. I want to create big mountains. Let's go ahead and create these hills in our landscape. And as you know, I always like to introduce new tools and techniques in each landscape series that I create. So for today's episode, we're going to be using a tool called TerreSculptor 2 to create the landscape for us. So I show you the software here. So this is the tool we're going to be using, and we'll be creating a terrain like this in TerreSculptor, and then we'll be exporting the height map and importing it into Unreal Engine. So the first thing you're going to need to do is to get hold of the software. There are two versions. If I just skip over to the site, so I'll put the link for this software download in the description below. It's created by Dimension Media. There are, as I said, there's two versions. TerreSculptor 2, which we'll be using, is free for use, although there's a Patreon option so you can donate to the author. And TerreSculptor 3 is the paid for version. I believe it's 99 Canadian dollars. So it has extra features, but we're going to be using TerreSculptor 2 today. So download and install this version here, and then we will start to create our new TerreSculptor project. When you open up TerreSculptor for the first time, you'll see this Welcome to TerreSculptor panel. If you just shut this down, first of all, we're going to change a setting in the program. So go to Tools, Settings, and if you find the Dimensions tab here, make sure Unreal Engine is ticked on, and what it'll do is it'll give you some convenience features which will show you the landscape sizes that tie into the Unreal Engine supported landscape sizes. So that'll be incredibly useful when we set up our projects here. So make sure that's set up first. And now we can create a new project in TerreSculptor. So we'll do File, New Project, and you'll see that we've got this UE option here, and that'll show us the sizes that we can support in Unreal Engine. I'm going to go for a 4K landscape here. So if you go down here to 4033 and select that, and then if you click Lock Aspect Ratio, it'll show you the square aspects for this particular size, and there's only one option here. So select that and click OK, and you see you've now got 4033 by 4033, and click OK again to load that up. So what we'll have here, so you can use your mouse wheel to zoom out, and you've got a flat landscape at the moment here. You can hold the left mouse button down and you can sort of move around. So we haven't got anything here yet, so we want to generate some hills. And the way you generate textures and height in TerreSculptor is using either this Generate or Noise Map menu. So for hills, a Perlin noise map will give us what we want. So click on here, and now we have various parameters we can change here. So you can start off with some presets if you want. So we could start off with lumpy and create some sort of basic hills, and then you can start to adjust these settings here. So I will set up the parameters I created for my hills, and you can copy them and use them in yours as well. So the first thing is the broad size of the landscape. So you can see as I do this, it creates sort of details from like the finest detail to sort of a continental view. So for this one, I used 2016. Oops, I've actually hit enter by accident. Doesn't matter. I'll go back into the noise map and start again. So 2016 for the continent size, or the size here. Then in terms of layout, this is a sort of distance between the hills. So I'm going to go for something around 180. Doesn't have to be exact. And detail and roughness, well, you can see if I put it up here, you see you get more wrinkliness in the landscape. Now you don't want to go too far with this because you'll end up with sort of jagged edges. And because we're going to add textures that are going to simulate this sort of detail, we'll back this off a bit. So I've gone for a detail of 9 here and a roughness of around about 34. So it looks smooth here, but in reality we'll put textures on here which will make it look a little less smooth. Next thing is the shape. This has quite a big effect on the landscape. It's the sort of in between filtering of those hills. So actually let's bring it all the way down to 1 so that we get the look we're looking for, or get the look we're after. Density, I've just pulled that up slightly to 11. Gain is the height of the hills. So you can see there some of them are capped here. So we'll pull this down slightly. If we go down to 72. And now we don't have any caps on our hills. And finally the offset, you can see that's the height, general height of the landscape. So for this I've set it to 348. So you should have all of these settings. So let's make this 180 as well. That's what I had in my original one. So if you pause the video here, you'll be able to copy all of these settings. Obviously you can try your own if you want, but it might make following along the future episodes a bit difficult if our landscapes are drastically different. So once you've set your parameters, click OK, and we now have our landscape set up or shown here. Although it looks a little bit shallow here, but don't worry about that. What we'll do, the first thing we'll do is we will normalize this height map so that it makes the lowest points 0 and the highest points 1 on the landscape. It just gives us more flexibility when we import it. We get the most detail that we can use to size it in Unreal Engine. So to do that, go to modify and normalize. So if you click that, what you'll notice is the hills become apparently higher, but that's because we've stretched them out so that the data encapsulates the maximum range. So the other thing we can do in here as well is we can just adjust the look and feel in here just to see what it looks like. So if you go over to the sort of camera options here, if you go into material, you can choose color set, and you see it applies different colors here just to make it look like a landscape. Now because we're going for an Arctic look, if you choose the color set here, go up to Arctic, it will do it in a more sort of a snowy view, and if we zoom in, sort of look around, we can kind of get an idea of what it might look like. Obviously we're going to get better textures than this. It's just colors here. And what we can also do is we can switch off things here, like if you go into the where is it? In the objects here, we can switch off the grid in the middle here. We can leave the lighting on. We could have a backdrop, yeah, with some sort of sun here just to see what it looks like. None of this is going to apply to Unreal, but it's just useful to see what it might look like. And the other things we can do, I mean, there are other things you can, filters you can apply here. One that I like to do is, you can see that at the end of the landscape, it just sort of ends in midair. What I like to do is just feather the edges, so I bring it down to a flat level at the edge. And to do that, if you go into Transform, Flatten Edges, and a dialog box will come up here, and then we'll maximize the edge width and the feather width. Edge style low value means it'll bring it down to a low value at the edge, and we're going to bring it down to actually we're not going to use the custom edge value, so that's fine. So just click OK here, and what you see is there at the edge, it just brings all of the edges down to a flat edge. You don't have to do that, but I just think it will look nice in the game if you sort of come to an edge which is lower down. All right, so we've set everything up here. What we can do is we can first of all save our project in case we need to come back to it. So do save project, and we'll give it a name. So I'll call it Arctic Tutorial, and save. And now what we need to do is we need to export our height map so that we can import it into Unreal Engine. So go to File and Export Terrain. You have various different formats available here to you, but what we want to do is we want to go down to the PNG format. So you want to pick this one, PNG image, and then we will call it, well, again, whatever you want. So I'm going to call mine Arctic Tutorial, and this will be our file that we're going to import into Unreal Engine. And save. And 16-bit grayscale is what you want. So click OK here. And now we are done in creating the height map. So we'll now go and set up our project in Unreal Engine and import this height map. We need to create a new project in Unreal Engine. So open up your Unreal 5 editor, go to the games section and pick third person. I always like to have a third person view so we can run around in our level and check height against the mannequin. So leave the default, so we're going to do blueprint, desktop maximum, and give the project a name. So I'm going to call it Arctic Tutorial and click create. And it will start to create the project with the third person game mode enabled, and it'll come up here with the sort of standard template for third person. You can dismiss the new plugins are available down here, and we actually want to create our own new blank level for this. So go up to File, New Level, and we will do an empty level and create. So we have a completely blank slate here. First thing we need to do is create all of our lighting and atmosphere assets. So go to Window and Environment Light Mixer, and we'll create pretty much everything here except for Atmospheric Light 1. So we'll create the Skylight, Atmospheric Light 0, which is our sun, Sky Atmosphere, Volumetric Cloud, and Height Fog. And once you've done that, you can close that down. We'll come back to this lighting setup later on, because as I said in the intro, we're going to go for a sort of a monochromatic, overcast, misty feel. So we'll need to change some of these lighting assets in order to give us that look and feel. But for now, let's go ahead and import our terrain. Before we create the landscape here, let's save the level. So click the save button at the top, and let's create a new folder here called Maps. Go into that folder and give your level a name, Arctic Forest, and save that. Now for the landscape material, if you've been following any of my early tutorials, you know I'm a big fan of the OpenLand auto landscape material. It has a wealth of features which makes it really easy to add great texturing to your landscape, and it's free for non-commercial use. So let's get hold of that asset first before we import the landscape, and then we can apply it immediately. So what you need to do is you need to go to this page on GitHub. I will again post the description or the link in the description below. You just need to go here, go to code and download this zip file and then unzip it somewhere. Once you've done that, you will have something like, let's see if I can find it, OpenLand here. You'll have a series of folders. You'll probably have 3 folder levels or 2 folder levels above this. You'll have sort of OpenLand and then some other folders and then OpenLand again. What you want to do is you want to find the folder with these subfolders: blueprints, core, grass, maps, physical materials or physics materials. So once you've found this level, go back up to the OpenLand folder above it, Control C to copy it, then find your project, which we called Arctic Tutorial, go to the content folder and paste it in here. And now that'll be available in your project. So we can shut that down now. And if we go back to our project and we open up the content drawer, you'll see that there is now an OpenLand folder with those subfolders in: blueprint, core, grass, etc., maps. So make sure you do that first, and now we're ready to import our landscape. So let's go into landscape mode, and what we want to do here is we want to import our height map from a file. So we want to import the height map that we created from TerreSculptor. So if you click on this file finder here, navigate to where you saved your height map, exported your height map, and we called it Arctic Tutorial. Double click to open that up. You'll see a very rough outline of the landscape in the viewport window, and you'll see by default it has set it to the right settings, 4033 by 4033. So that's all good. So the only thing we need to change here is the Z height on the scale. Because we normalize this, it's going to encompass the whole of the range of Unreal Engine. So it's going to be larger, or higher I should say, than we want. So let's take the scale here and we'll reduce it to 50. So it will be half the scale. You remember we normalized this so we got the maximum amount of detail, but now we can shrink it down, retain the detail, but get the height that we want. And the other thing we want to do is apply our material before we click import as well. So if you click on the drop down on the material, if you type the word theme, and you'll find this OpenLand theme default. So this is the auto landscape material that we just imported. So click that. Right, we're ready to go. You might see preparing shaders up here. So let that finish first, just so you're going to see the finished result. So I'll let that finish. It's almost done. And then click on import. And after a few seconds, you will get a landscape, albeit with a very shiny texture on it. And that's just because we need to assign the landscape layers for the OpenLand auto material. So go to the Paint tab in your landscape. You see all of the layers here that are available with the OpenLand theme that we've applied, and all we want to do is we want to allocate this auto forest layer. So if you use this drop down, there is an asset included here, auto forest layer info. Click on that and we should in a moment get a proper textured landscape over here. There. So you can see that we have a hill landscape, but it is all grass and rocks, and of course for our Arctic view we want snow. So that's fine. We can fix that in just one moment. So let's come out of landscape mode. So go back to select. Be a good time here to do a save. And now we want to change that landscape material so that it is snow on the majority of the landscape. So let me just come up a bit so I can see. You can see it's got the hills and everything that we want. It's just the texturing that we need to change. So go into your content drawer by using Control Space, and let's not do it this way. Select your landscape on the outliner in the right hand side, and if you go down to the landscape material, you can see it's here, MI OpenLand theme default. Browse to that, and then you can open it up, and let's just move it over to the side a bit. And there is a vast array of parameters here we can change. All we want to change here really is just the let me just show you this slope bias here. So this slope bias effectively determines which textures appear at which slope levels. So if you reduce this, you get more grass. Here at its default setting of -7, you get a blend between the slope of the rock and the grass. And if we make it -14, we'll get just rock here. But we want snow here. So leave it as -14, so it's just one texture. And now what we want to do is we want to apply our snow mask to bring it onto the top level. So if you scroll down in this OpenLand theme until you find the Smart Mask 1 section, so that's section 8.1 here. And so Smart Mask 1 is dedicated for snow in this auto material. So what we need to do is we need to first of all adjust the threshold here so that this is the height at which the snow will start. So let's reduce this down to -6,000, and you can see that we are starting to get snow on the top of the hills here, but we want snow everywhere. So let's uncheck the edge noise and the area noise. So we're just going to get a simple snow without any sort of noise and feathering around there. Let's change the edge smoothness to 0 at the moment, so we get a hard line. So now what we're getting here is just snow at that height and just ending suddenly. So we do want a little bit of edge smoothness here so that it doesn't suddenly change. So let's change this edge smoothness to 10,000. Okay, and now what we're getting is we're getting snow on the hills, and then we're getting the rock at the sort of base level. In the next episode, we're gonna choose better textures for here, so it's all going to be varying degrees of snow, sort of pure snow at the top, and then sort of snow and ice or snow and rocks at the base. So we don't have to worry about it looking like rocks at the moment. And the only other thing I'll do here is I might do a little bit of edge noise here just to create a little bit of randomness where the two textures meet. So if you select edge noise and check it on, and we'll leave the settings. So the default setting is 1, 205, the default settings for me, and this texture is called T-Perlin noise. It should be the same for you as well. And you can see what it's done is it's created these sort of spotty effects where the hill meets the valley. So that will do for now. As I said, we'll change the rocky texture here at the start of the next episode. But the next thing I want to do is I want to create a lake in one of these hollows. There wasn't a lake in my reference pictures, but I think it would look nice to have the reflections of the fir trees in the water. So let's create a lake in one of the valley areas. Before we can create our lake, we need to enable the water plugin in Unreal Engine. So go into Edit, Plugins, search for water and choose this water plugin. Say yes, it's experimental version. Just be aware, again, you know, it might have problems in a production version, so just be aware of that. So click yes and then click on Restart. Okay, and then once you've restarted, you might find this where it's loaded the original template level. So let's first of all open our main level, and then we'll stop that happening if we reopen the editor again. So go to your maps section, double click Arctic Forest to open up your level. And then let's just change our project settings so it loads this level by default. So go into Edit, Project Settings, find Maps and Modes and select the Arctic Forest as your editor startup map and as your game default map. And that means that when you open this project in future, it will open up this level. You don't have to open it manually each time. And also makes the, if you build the game, it makes the Arctic Forest the main map as well. Okay, so let's do that. And now we're ready to create our lake. So hopefully if you haven't moved around too much, you'll see ahead of you this sort of valley here where we're going to put the lake. It doesn't really matter where you put it, but you might want to put it the same place as me so that it's easier to follow on future episodes. So what we'll do now is we will go into the quick add menu, and if you go to volumes and go all classes, and then it's alphabetical order, go all the way down, scroll down to the bottom and choose find water. And what we want to use is water body custom here. And if you drag that over, you'll get a very tiny little water body there. So we need to scale it up first of all. So you might want to rename it. So over in the outliner, let's click F2 and call it lake. Go down to the scale and click on the lock icon to scale uniformly, and we'll type in 200 for the value here. So it's preparing shaders down here below, so might have to wait until that finishes before we see anything. So let's just give it a few seconds. Okay, let's change the scale to 200. Okay, and then you can see some water here, but it's too low at the moment. So you can raise it up here until it's at the level you want. So that's about the level I want here. If you want to be precise here, I used a value of minus 3100. And you can see that it created this sort of nice effect. If I zoom in a bit, it created this nice effect over here where you've got a tiny little island, sort of shallow area. But it's filling out that area nicely. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to change the color of this. We haven't changed the lighting yet, but I want this to be sort of more dark and menacing. So I don't want this light water, or I want a sort of a darker, slightly less colorful water. So in order to change the water material, we ought to really just create a folder for our custom materials anyway. So use Control Space to open up your content browser, go to the top level, and we'll create another new folder here called Materials, which we'll use in future episodes as well. And what you want to do now is you want to go into your engine content. Now if you don't see the engine and plugin content, go to the settings here and make sure you've got show engine content and show plugin content enabled here. And now if you go to the lake here and go to the material, it'll be down near the bottom. So there's the water material. So at the moment it's using this one called Water Material Custom Mesh. If you browse to it, it's in the one of the plugins folders. What we want to do is we want to drag this. So let's scroll this up to the top. Oops, go back into it again, sorry. So go to the lake, browse to the material, go up here and open up the content. So your materials folder is showing here, and then drag this water material custom mesh onto the materials and do copy, not move. If you move it, then you'll lose it from the plugins folder. So copy here, and then we can go to the materials folder here, and let's just rename this water material lake. And we can now apply this to the lake here. So if you go over here and find that water material lake that you just created, you might have two here because one's in the plugin. You want the one that's in the game materials here. That's the one that you've just created. Okay, and now we can edit it to change the color. So again, browse to the material, open it up. Let's just move it over to the side of the screen a bit. There's a wide range of settings for water, but all we're interested at the moment is the color settings. So go down to absorption and scattering and just select those, expand them out, and for the absorption I want it to be a sort of a uniform, almost grey. So we'll make the red, green and blue the same. So make them 150, 150, 150. So it creates this sort of grey, murky water, and then we'll reduce the alpha to 2 so that it makes it darker. And the other thing I want to do is just change the scattering, lower the alpha so that it's a little bit more see-through. So if I do 0.1 on the alpha here, you can see that it's darkened the water here and made it a little bit more transparent. So that's all we'll do for the lake at the moment. The last thing I'm going to do in this episode is just change the lighting to make it more misty and atmospheric. Before we adjust our lighting and atmosphere, let's just put a post-process volume on the scene so we can manually control the exposure. So go to, in fact, let's do a save first to save where we are. Go to the add section or add menu, volumes and post-process volume, and just drag it into the scene, doesn't matter where. And in the details here, search for INF or infinite and check this infinite extent unbound so that it applies to the whole scene. Close down the search dialog and then look for exposure here and select the first two parameters here. What we want to do is change the metering mode to manual. It'll go completely dark and we'll raise the exposure compensation to 9. So we've now got a slightly darker scene here, which is what we wanted. So we can see some of the shadows. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to change this. You can see it's blue sky. We can see the clouds here. We want to start going through our lighting so that we make it overcast, shadowy, sort of misty day. So let's go through each of the lighting elements in sequence. So start off with the directional light. First thing we can do here is, well, we'll reduce the intensity slightly. So I'll reduce the intensity from 10 lux to 8. So that just brings it down slightly. But the other thing we can do is we can change the temperature of the sunlight so we can make it cooler. Now you can do that a couple of ways. You can change the light color directly, so you could push it into the blue spectrum, but you've also got the ability to change the color temperature here as well. So if I click on use temperature, if you push it lower, it will get sort of redder and warmer, and if you push it up, it'll go bluer and cooler. So what we'll do is we'll put in a value here of 8500, which puts it slightly into the blue spectrum. So that'll create a slightly cooler effect. Okay, so that's it for the directional light. For the skylight, just make sure you click on this real-time capture. It will just make it more realistic and will continually update as you change different elements of your scene. So make sure that's selected. Next we will look at the exponential height fog, and we don't really want to do too much here. You're going to see that the sky atmosphere is going to make the biggest difference here. So we'll leave the fog density at 0.02 and the fog height fall off I just made 0.1, so it just softened the edges here. So you might want to do that as well. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is I want to change the sky atmosphere, and this is going to make the biggest difference to our scene. So the sky atmosphere has these two different scattering sections, Rayleigh scattering and Mie scattering, and while I'm no expert in the detail of this, I believe that the Rayleigh scattering is the sort of outer atmosphere, and the Mie scattering is the main atmospheric scattering here. So I have reduced the Rayleigh scattering, so if I put 0.005 here, what you can see that's done is it's created less of an atmosphere at the top level here. So it's almost as though we're slightly into space, which isn't very realistic. But if I then change the Mie scattering as well to increase that, so there's more sort of pollutions or pollutants in the air, you'll see that this works quite well together. So what I'll do is I'll raise the Mie scattering right up to 0.5, and can you see that that has created this? It's almost a fog, but it's really almost like sort of a pollution or a mist in the air. And you can see when I go close up here that it really, together with the changes we've done with the sort of cool lighting and everything like that, it really has created a very sort of menacing, chilly atmosphere here, and definitely the monochromatic look I was after. So we'll leave it at that for now for this episode. In the next episode we will change the textures first of all. So we'll remove this rock and create more sort of snow and ice here. We'll also create our foliage, our fir trees and our rocks using procedural foliage volumes to make sure that they grow at the right level in the landscape. So stay tuned, and I'll be back with the next episode soon. See you then.